There is a strange paradox at the heart of the human experience. A glitch in our operating system that we rarely speak about, but which consumes nearly every waking hour of our lives. We believe we are living in the world, the solid, tangible world of objects, people, and events. But if you look closely, strictly, and with absolute honesty, you will find that you are not living in the world at all. You are living in a simulation of the world constructed entirely within your own mind. And in this simulation, you are suffering from wounds that have not been inflicted and running from monsters that do not exist. Let me ask you to perform an audit of your own soul. Stop for a moment. Close the eyes of your memory and transport yourself back exactly 1 year. Try to reconstruct the mental landscape you inhabited 12 months ago. Can you recall the texture of your anxiety? Try to remember the specific things that worried you the most. The fears that sat heavy on your chest at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, convinced that disaster was imminent. The difficult conversations you rehearsed in the shower over and over, perfecting your defense for an attack that hadn't happened. The financial ruin you were certain was around the corner. The social humiliation you felt was inevitable. Hold those terrified moments in your mind. Now, look at the reality of the last year. How many of those catastrophes actually came to pass? Take your time with this. It is not a rhetorical question. It is a scientific inquiry into the validity of your own thoughts. If you examine your history with brutal honesty, you will likely discover a startling statistical anomaly. The vast majority of what you feared, perhaps 90% or more, never manifested in physical reality. The catastrophe remained a ghost. The disaster you rehearsed 100 times, spending precious hours of your life sweating and trembling, never showed up. It was a play written by your mind, performed by your mind, for an audience of one at you. And here is what makes this realization even more striking, perhaps even more humbling. Even among the small percentage of things that did happen, the actual difficulties, the real breakups, the tangible failures, how many were truly as apocalyptic as you had pictured them in the cinema of your mind? When you finally stood face to face with the thing you dreaded, did it annihilate you? Did the ground open up and swallow you whole? Or did you find, quite surprisingly, that when the problem was right in front of you, it was no longer a monster, but simply a situation that required action, a situation you were capable of handling, a situation that, unlike the ghost, had boundaries and limits. When you analyze your own biography, a clear, undeniable pattern emerges. The mind predicts disaster with the confidence of a prophet. Reality turns out differently, and yet, despite being wrong thousands of times in a row, the mind continues to predict. It continues to fear. It continues to spend your limited life energy constructing futures that may never exist. Think about the implications of this. If most of your worries never become real, then most of the suffering you have experienced in your life was technically unnecessary. You were not suffering from life. You were not suffering from the events of the world. You were suffering from your imagination of life. Your mind created entire dimensions of pain, elaborate, detailed, excruciating worlds that existed nowhere in the universe except between your ears. You have been paying interest on a debt that was never yours to owe. Now, let us go deeper into this architecture of illusion. Consider the cost. The economic cost of your own vitality. How much of your life have you spent preparing for moments that never arrived? How many hours have been lost to the void, rehearsing sharp words for arguments that never took place? Building fortresses to defend against enemies who were actually indifferent to you. The human mind spends an enormous amount of voltage on fear and comparatively very little on actual action. It is like an army that spends decades marching in circles, digging trenches, and firing at shadows, only to arrive completely exhausted when a real battle finally presents itself. This is the invisible weight you do not see. I am not talking about the weight of your actual problems. Those are real. Rent is real. Illness is real. Heartbreak is real. They have mass and gravity, and they deserve your focused attention and your compassionate action. But I am talking about the weight of the imaginary problems, the projected disasters, the mental rehearsals, the phantom limbs of pain. This invisible weight is often 10 times heavier than anything life has actually placed on your shoulders. The strangest, most tragic part of this condition: we rarely notice we are carrying it. We have become so accustomed to the background noise of anxiety that think this is just what it feels like to be alive. We think the exhaustion comes from our jobs, or our families, or the state of the world. We think the tension in our neck and the tightness in our stomach is simply the price of being a responsible adult. We do not realize that we have picked up burdens along the road that no one asked us to carry, burdens that serve no purpose other than to crush us slowly. So why? Why does the magnificent instrument of the human mind do this? Why does the most complex object in the known universe dedicate so much processing power to creating suffering that does not need to exist? Why does it abduct us from the safety of the present moment and drag us into futures that may never arrive, or trap us in pasts that are dead and gone? To understand this, we need to look at the machinery itself. We need to look at a process of psychology calls rumination. The word itself is instructive. It comes from the Latin word for how cows digest food. They chew the grass, swallow it, regurgitate it, chew it again, and swallow it again. It is a cycle of endless processing. The human mind does exactly the same thing with thoughts. It excavates a painful memory or a frightening possibility, and it chews on it. It extracts every ounce of bitterness. Then it swallows it, only to bring it back up 5 minutes later to chew on it again. Over and over. The same thoughts, the same worn neural pathways, the same grooves carved deep into the psyche. You think about a mistake you made at work 3 years ago. You replay the scene. You see the look on your boss's face. You feel the hot flush of shame in your cheeks. Then you think about it again and again. Each time you replay the mental tape, your body does not know the difference between the memory and reality. It releases the same stress hormones, the same cortisol, the same adrenaline. You feel the shame fresh, as if it is happening right now. The event happened once in reality, but through rumination, you have voluntarily persecuted yourself with it thousands of times. The same mechanism applies to the future. You worry about a medical test result. You visualize the doctor's face. You hear the bad news in your mind. You plan your funeral. Then you shake it off, only to start the cycle again 10 minutes later. Each cycle brings the same tightness in the chest, the same shallow breath. The problem has not happened yet statistically. It may never happen, but you have already suffered the emotional impact of the tragedy repeatedly. It is crucial to understand that none of this is a flaw in your character. You are not broken. You are not bad at life. You are simply operating with outdated hardware. The human brain evolved this way for a very specific reason: survival. For our ancestors on the savannah, it was infinitely safer to imagine danger and be wrong than to miss danger and be dead. The ancestor who heard a rustle in the grass and immediately imagined a lion ran away. 9 times out of 10, it was just the wind. But the one time it was a lion, he survived. The ancestor who heard the rustle and thought, "It's probably nothing, let's stay present," was eaten. We are the descendants of the paranoid. We are the children of the worriers. We inherited brains that are biologically wired to scan for threats, to prioritize negative information, to imagine worst-case scenarios, and to replay problems endlessly in a desperate search for safety. But here is the tragedy of modern life. This same mechanism, once our savior, has become our tormentor. The threats we face today are rarely physical predators. They are abstract. They are social anxieties, email notifications, identity crisis, imposter syndrome, vague uncertainties about the economy. These are problems that cannot be solved by running, fighting, or freezing. And yet, the mind treats them with the same biological intensity as a predator. It circles around them endlessly, generating high-voltage fear and stress. But because you cannot run from an email and you cannot fight a recession with your fists, the energy has nowhere to go. It turns inward. It becomes the grinding hum of anxiety. The Buddha saw this glitch in the human system with terrifying clarity. Over 2,500 years before modern neuroscience could map the amygdala, or the default mode network, he and his disciples identified a specific mental process they called Papanca. Papanca is often translated as mental proliferation, but a better way to understand it is explosion or expansion. It is the mind's tendency to take a tiny grain of sensory input and explode it into a complex, dramatic, self-referential story. It is the tendency to turn something simple into something complicated, something neutral into something personal. In the Madhupika Sutta, the Venerable Ma Kakne explained this chain reaction with the precision of a software engineer explaining code. He described how the eye sees a form and consciousness arises. This is simple contact. But then feeling arises. We like it or we don't like it. And here is where the glitch begins. What one feels, one perceives. What one perceives, one thinks about. What one thinks about, one mentally proliferates. Let us slow this down and look at it in high definition. A simple event occurs. The mind perceives it. The mind starts thinking about it. And then, the thinking takes on a life of its own. It expands. It grows branches. It creates a narrative. Let me give you a concrete example of Papanca in action. You send a text message to a close friend or a romantic partner. Hey, do you have a minute to talk? An hour passes. Then no reply. In reality, in the physical universe, only one thing has happened. A digital packet of information was sent, and no return packet has yet arrived. That is the raw data. It is neutral. It has no emotional weight. But watch what the Papanca machine does. It begins to fill in the silence with noise. Why haven't they answered? They usually answer immediately. Are they angry with me? Did I say something insensitive yesterday? I bet they are with someone else. They are talking about me. Maybe they don't care about me anymore. Actually, I've felt them pulling away for months. This always happens to me. Everyone eventually leaves. I am fundamentally unlovable. I will die alone. Do you see the acceleration? From a single unanswered message, a nothingness, the mind has constructed an entire Greek tragedy. It has created characters, assigned them cruel motivations, drafted a script of rejection, and reached a catastrophic conclusion about your entire worth as a human being. And the worst part, you feel the emotions of this drama as if it were absolute truth. Your stomach drops. Your heart races. You feel heavy, depressed, rejected. You walk around your house carrying the physical weight of a rejection that has not actually happened. Then 3 hours later, the phone buzzes.
So sorry.
Left my phone in the car while I was hiking. Calling you now. In an instant, the drama dissolves. The tragedy evaporates. But notice this, for 3 hours, you lived inside a world of hell. Your body processed the chemicals of grief. Your mind spun in agony. That suffering was real to you, but its cause was a hallucination. You were trapped in a simulation of your own making. The Buddha pointed directly to this mechanism in the opening verses of the Dhammapada. Mind goes first, mind is chief, things are mind made. If one speaks or acts with a corrupted mind, suffering follows like the wheel follows the ox's hoof. He is telling us that the world we experience is not the world out there. It is the world filtered, processed, and often distorted by the mind in here. The world outside is real, yes. Your responsibilities are real. The challenges you face are real. But the way you experience all of this, whether it feels like a crushing, suffocating weight, or a manageable series of tasks, depends enormously on what your mind does with the raw data. The same situation can feel like a catastrophe to a turbulent mind and like a simple, interesting difficulty to a clear one. Now that we have exposed the mechanism, let us look more carefully at what this means for the energy you burn every single day. I want to offer you a metaphor to carry with you. Imagine you are walking a long, winding road. You are wearing a backpack. This backpack represents your life. Inside the backpack are your actual responsibilities, the things you genuinely need to attend in the physical world. Your work deadlines, feeding your children, paying the electric bill, caring for your aging body. This is the real weight. It exists. It is yours to carry. And carrying it is simply what it means to be alive, to have commitments, to be a participant in the human drama. This weight is manageable. It is designed to be carried. But as you walk down this road, something else happens. You have a habit. As you walk, you bend down and pick up stones from the side of the road. You pick up a jagged stone called, "What if I fail this project?" and you put it in the bag. You pick up a heavy, gray stone called, "I am not as talented as my colleague." You pick up a sharp, cutting stone called, "What if the economy crashes in 5 years?" You pick up a massive boulder called, "I regret what I said 10 years ago." One by one, mile after mile, you fill your backpack with stones that were never lying on the road ahead of you. They are not obstacles you have to climb over. They are stones you created and voluntarily picked up. By the end of the day, you are collapsed on the side of the road, gasping for breath, utterly exhausted. You look at the road and then think, life is too hard. The road is too steep. I cannot go on. But you are mistaken. It is not the road that is too steep. It is not life that is too heavy. It is the 50 pounds of imaginary stones you are carrying on top of your actual supplies. You do not realize that half the weight, perhaps most of the weight, is composed of thoughts, not facts. Here is how to tell the difference, and this distinction is the key to freedom. The real burden is the deadline that needs to be met by 5 p.m. It requires typing, focus, and effort. The added burden, the stone, is the voice that says, if I don't do this perfectly, I'll be fired and lose my house. The real burden is a child who is acting out and needs guidance. The added burden is the thought, I'm a terrible parent. I've ruined them, and they will hate me when they grow up. The real burden is a relationship going through a rough patch that requires a conversation. The added burden is the certainty that love is impossible for me. I am destined to be abandoned. Look closely at these two kinds of burden. The real burden asks something of you. It asks for action. It asks for attention. It asks for care. You can engage with it. You can work with it. Even when you don't know exactly what to do, you can take a single step. Real problems have solutions, or at least next steps. The added burden, the stone, asks nothing, because it cannot be solved. You cannot solve the thought, I am worthless. You cannot fix the fear, I'll be alone forever, by trying to control the future. These mental additions do not respond to action. They exist only in the realm of thought, and they dissolve only when you see them for what they are, phantoms. The Buddha was radically honest about the nature of existence. He did not teach a way to escape reality or pretend that everything is love and light. He was not a spiritual bypasser. In his very first teaching, he looked the human condition in the eye and said, this is the noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Illness is suffering. Death is suffering. Separation from the loved is suffering. Not getting what one wants is suffering. Life includes friction. It includes entropy. It includes loss. The Buddha acknowledged this fully, but notice something vital in his teaching. He distinguishes between the pain of the event and the suffering of the reaction. This is often called the teaching of the two arrows. If a warrior is struck by an arrow in battle, he feels pain. That is the first arrow. It is physical, inevitable reality. But if the warrior then looks at the wound
And then thinks, why me? This is unfair. I am going to die.
I am a failure of a soldier, he shoots himself with a second arrow. This second arrow is mental, and the Buddha said the pain of the second arrow is often far worse than the first. We cannot always control the first arrow. Life will shoot arrows of loss, sickness, and difficulty at us. But the second arrow, the arrow of this shouldn't be happening, the arrow of what if it gets worse, the arrow of self-pity. That is the arrow we shoot at ourselves. That is the optional suffering. When the mind runs to the past to dwell on regret, it is pulling old arrows out of the ground and stabbing itself with them again. The event is gone. It dissolved into the ether years ago. But through memory and rumination, you resurrect the pain. You keep the wound fresh. When the mind races ahead to worry, it is manufacturing arrows for a battle that hasn't started. You suffer now for a future that does not yet exist. The Buddha spoke to this temporal trap in the Bhattacharya Sutta. One should not chase after the past, nor place expectations on the future. What is past is left behind, the future has not yet come. Whoever sees clearly the present moment, right here, right now, that is the state to develop. This is not about being irresponsible. You can learn from the past without living in the haunted house of regret. You can plan for the future, you can buy insurance, set goals, make schedules without being consumed by the fever of fear. The difference lies in whether you are using thought as a tool, a servant to help you navigate, or whether thought has taken over and become the master, using you as a battery to fuel its endless dramas. When you see this distinction clearly, something profound begins to shift in your consciousness. You realize that a significant portion of what exhausts you, what tightens your shoulders, clouds your judgment, and drains your joy is not life itself. It is what your mind adds to life. And what the mind adds, the mind can also learn to set down. So, the ultimate question: how do we actually do this? How do we stop picking up extra stones? How do we train a brain that has spent millions of years evolving to worry? Here we need to talk about mindfulness, but we must be careful. The word has been commodified, watered down, and turned into a slogan for relaxation. Real mindfulness is not about relaxation. It is not about zoning out. It is a rigorous, precise, and active engagement with reality. Sometimes mindfulness is presented as passive observation. Just watch yachts like clouds. Don't judge. If that were the whole picture, we might as well be stones in a field. A stone does not react to thoughts. But a stone also does not wake up. A stone does not transform. The Buddha taught something far more complete, far more ardent. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the instructions for mindfulness include 3 specific qualities: atapi, ardent effort; sampajano, clear knowing; and sati, mindfulness. Ardent effort means you have to care. You have to bring energy to the practice. Clear knowing means wisdom. You understand what you are seeing. You don't just see a thought, you understand its nature, its origin, and where it leads. And the purpose, having removed covetousness and grief concerning the world. The goal is freedom. So, what does this look like in the laboratory of your daily life? Step 1 is don't recognition. Most of the time, we are merged with our thoughts. We are the river. We don't know we are thinking. We just think this is reality. The moment you say to yourself, anxiety is arising, or here is the story about me being a failure again, in that split second, you have broken the spell. You are no longer the thought here. You are the witness of the thought. You have stepped out of the simulation and into the control room. Step 2 is don't investigation and clear knowing. You look at the thought with curiosity, not fear. You ask, is this true? Is this useful? Is this happening right now? Or is this a ghost from the past? You look at the texture of the thought. You see that it is impermanent. It arose just now. If you don't feed it, it will pass. You realize it is not you. It is just mental weather passing through the vast sky of your awareness. Step 3 is don't the pivot don't. Once you see the thought clearly as a stone you don't need to carry, you have a choice. You can pick it up and put it in your backpack, or you can leave it on the ground. The Buddha gave detailed, tactical instructions for this in the Vitakasa Sutta. He offered 5 specific methods for dealing with sticky, obsessive thoughts. First, don't replacement don't. Just as a carpenter uses a new peg to drive out an old, rotten peg, you use a wholesome object of attention to drive out the unwholesome one. You turn your attention to the sensation of the breath. You focus on the feeling of your feet on the floor. You focus on gratitude. You physically shift the mind's channel. Second, don't examine the danger don't. You look at the worry and you get real with yourself. If I think this thought for the next hour, how will I feel? I will feel sick, weak, and clouded. You develop a healthy disgust for the suffering the thought causes, just as you would be disgusted by a carcass hung around your neck. You drop it because it is toxic. Third, don't ignore it don't. Withdraw attention. like looking away from a disturbing sight. You don't fight the thought, you starve it. You simply return to your work, your conversation, your tea. You let the thought scream in the background until it loses its voice from lack of attention. Fourth, don't relax the tension. Don't. Notice how the thought creates tension in your body, the clenched jaw, the raised shoulders. Consciously relax the body. Often, when you relax the physical container, the mental content loses its grip. And finally, if nothing else works, don't sheer determination. Don't. The Buddha describes this as crushing the mind with the mind. You say, enough. You use your will to cut the thought. This is a last resort, but sometimes necessary. This is the work. It is not magic. It is training. You notice the fear arising. You see that 90% of it is a simulation. You recognize the cost of carrying it, and you make a choice to return to the raw data of the present moment. I want to be honest with you. Knowing this intellectual framework is very different from living it. You have a life to live. You have 1,000 demands on your time. You are not a monk in a cave. You cannot wash your mind with perfect clarity 24 hours a day. That expectation is just another stone for your backpack, the stone of spiritual perfectionism. What you can do is begin small, micro doses of awakening. One moment of genuine presence while you drink your coffee. One conscious breath before you open your email. One moment of stopping in the middle of a worry spiral and asking, is this problem happening now or in my head? Even if you only catch yourself once a day, that is a victory. That is a crack in the prison wall. The Buddha offered a beautiful image for this gradual process. Do not belittle merit, thinking it will not come to me. Drop by drop the water pot is filled. Likewise, the wise one, gathering it little by little, fills oneself with good. Transformation is geological. It is water wearing down rock. It happens drop by drop. Small seeing by small seeing. Small letting go by small letting go. The pot fills slowly, but if you keep dripping, it will fill. And what about the bad days? The days when the anxiety is a tidal wave. The days when you forget everything you just heard and you drown in the simulation. Those days are allowed. They are part of the path. The path is not a straight line up a mountain. It is a spiral. The goal is not to never get lost. The goal is to notice eventually that you are lost and to gently, without self-judgment, find your way back. Every return counts. Every time you put down a stone, even for a minute, your muscles recover. You have everything you need to begin this lighter way of walking. You don't need to wait for a retreat. You don't need to wait until you are retired. You don't need to wait until you are better. You can start now, in this breath. Drop the stone. Look at what is actually in front of you. It is just a moment. And it is the only place where you can ever be free.